the Chase Thomas Podcast, for people who have nothing but time to kill.
He was the head coach for like 15 years.
Okay, good call, good pull.
But yeah,
Sammy,
another
Slammy,
random UNG
Samsonite.
basketball. But yeah, dog bites. You ready for it?
I'm ready for dog bites, sir. Our weekly installment here on this program where Matt, the UGA expert, drops some dog bites for us. So what do you have for us this week, sir?
I got some dog bites for you this week. So last week we were talking about Georgia's pass catchers and what they've been the last 3 years, how they've really, taken off in terms of production, gotten much more consistent than in years past. Well, I don't know if you saw, there's a little kerfuffle, maybe that's the term, with a former UGA running back on social media, kind of regretful of his decision to go to the University of Georgia. Never really was the guy. Always had to sit behind other good running backs. So it got me thinking, what are we going to expect from Georgia's running back position in 2024? So you look at like what Georgia typically was when Kirby Smart first took over. Back in 2017, everyone knows about Nick Chubb and Tony Michel. 2 1,200-plus yard rushers that year. The next year with Swift and Holyfield, 2,000-yard rushers. You got to go back to 2019. DeAndre Swift rushed for over 1,200 yards. It's the last time Georgia had a 1,000-yard rusher. So they haven't really had that guy that you just feed the rock to, like they've typically had in the first years under Kirby Smart. You look at the running backs Georgia's put in the NFL since Kirby Smart arrived. Of the 4 guys, or of the, I should say, 6 that have been drafted, 4 of them are first or second round picks. So that's like big time, high level NFL prospects. And James Cook was the last one, but even he didn't have the college production. Zamir White was the leading rusher on that team. Kenny McIntosh was a 7th round pick after having a really productive year in 2022. But you look at 2023 with Dejon Edwards and Kendall Milton this past year, both roughly 800 yards, just under 6 yards a carry between the two of them. 2022, it was more of a 3-headed, but McIntosh was the lead guy. Kind of the same thing. A couple guys over 700 yards rushing. No one kind of averaging a lot, 5 yards a carry. 2021, same thing with Zamir White and James Cook. You're not seeing the level of production. And maybe it's because Georgia's become a better passing attack, but it's also not the yards per carry. Like Nick Chubb was averaging 6 yards a carry on more carries than any of these guys have gotten. Sonny Michel was up near 8 yards a carry. DeAndre Swift was over 6.5 yards a carry. You're seeing a lot of 5 yards a carry, and part of it, I think, is the not having elite talent at running back, and part of it, I think, is the offensive line hasn't been necessarily as elite in run blocking as you'd expect with some of these guys, how highly ranked they are coming out of high school. So I'm really curious to see 2019, or also going back to 2020 is the one year left out. Zamir White had just over 800 yards, and James Cook had 300 yards that year. And that's a 10-game season, so it's a little different. But you haven't seen elite rushing production from Georgia in a while. And DeAndre Swift in back in 2019 got almost double the carries of Brian Herrien, who's the second leading rusher that year. And so I think this is the first year since 2019 that you really look at Georgia's backfield and you think, okay, that one running back is much better than anyone else on the roster. So I'm curious to see if Trevor Etienne comes in and has maybe that DeAndre Swift kind of year where Georgia splits carries, but he's clearly getting the number one load.
Does it matter for Georgia if that's the case?
I think it matters in terms of there's not much proven like commodities in their backfield. Like you look at who it's going to be next year, like who's the number 2 guy on Georgia's, just off the top of your head? Like who would you say is the number 2 guy?
Branson Robinson.
See, probably Branson Robinson, I think, would be most people's answer, but I think he had a pretty bad injury, and you don't always know what a guy's going to be coming off an injury. Roderick Robinson was decent in a limited carries as a true freshman last year. Like I would probably put him up there with Branson Robinson, maybe Andrew Paul. And then you start talking about true freshmen that we haven't seen do anything. So Etienne's going to come in and be by far the most proven back on this roster. And I don't think and he hasn't necessarily carried the load either. He's had Montrell Johnson. I don't know. I haven't had the stats right in front of me, but I feel like they were basically 50-50 splitting carries. At least more like a Holyfield Swift situation. So I don't really know what to expect from Georgia's running backs outside of Etienne. And obviously he's coming into a new offense. I think running back is probably the easiest position to transfer into translate in any offense. You get the ball and you make people miss. Like it seems more simple than other positions. But yeah, I think you're going to see Georgia with the first 1,000-yard rusher since DeAndre Swift in 2019.
I think that's a really good call, and I think that's very, very possible. I also just think it's going to be a two-headed monster, and I just think this Georgia team, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I just think they're going to be a pass-first team. Like Carson's going to air it out more. I think a lot of people are curious if he opens it up more downfield. Maybe that was more of a personnel thing that they weren't taking a lot of deep shots last year. I wonder if that's something that's added into the playbook for Bobo for Carson this year to just flex that muscle and flex that skill for NFL scouts this fall. But I think the thing that makes me more confident than anything that Etienne's going to go over 1,000 is teams, generally speaking, obviously, to run out the clock. Georgia's going to be up the majority of the games they're in this season. And I think Etienne's going to have a lot of opportunity to carve up yards in the third and fourth quarter when Georgia's crockpotting the majority of their schedule. And with a not limited, but a situation that you outlined where it's just not as much known depth and just comfortable depth, Etienne's going to get the ball a lot. And I think I think a lot of Georgia fans maybe don't anticipate Etienne being the lead kind of superstar-ish back for Georgia because he was a two-headed monster in Florida and he wasn't the guy. But I think you're right in that my gut says he's going to be the lead back and have the opportunity to be kind of this big transfer home run kind of guy for Georgia this year. And I think he's going to be a big part for the Dogs. Is that weird for you just cheering for? Is it going to be weird for you with Etienne with Florida the last couple of years to now be cheering for him?
It's funny you say that because I think there's a natural, like me and my brother were talking about this. There's just like a natural to hate on Florida players. They're your rival, but he's like the one player. And there's probably a couple other players that like I never said a bad word about. I was like, yeah, he's pretty tight. I don't hate on him. So it's kind of funny that I didn't hate on him because he's actually good enough to play at Georgia. And these days, Florida doesn't have that many players, as crazy as it is to say, that actually could play at Georgia.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. I like that stat. I would go over for Etienne 1,000 yards. I would go over.
I think so, because the other point you made too, I think Georgia's going to be winning a lot of games. I think you've seen 2023 and 2022, the rushing stats look a lot better than that either of those teams really were at running the ball because, and not to just disrespect Kendall Milton, but I feel like a lot of his production in 2022 and 2023 was that pounding it in the fourth quarter and he gets 50, 60 more yards in the fourth quarter. And Georgia had like a top 30, top 25 rushing attack both of those years. Whereas I feel like when the game was truly on the line, like in the first half, Georgia was usually more 50-50 and having more success passing than running.
I don't disagree.
But I got one more. Go ahead. Thing for you. I wanted to rank the Georgia running backs like we did with the Georgia pass catchers. So, the top 5 is kind of easy. So I'm gonna go deep tracks. I'm gonna go the top 10 running backs of the 21st century. We're gonna just cut it off right there. Herschel Walker's the GOAT. Everyone knows that. Garrison Hurst, Roddy Hampton. They got some great ones back in the day. Terrell Davis. Starting in the 21st century, I'm going number 1, Todd Gurley. Nick Chubb, more yards, more productive, better Georgia career. I'm putting Nick Chubb 2. No Sean Marino, I'm going number 3. Sony Michel, number 4, and DeAndre Swift, number 5. What do you think about that top 5 right there?
Say it again. Say the last 3 again.
I got Gurley, Chubb, 1, 2, No Sean, Michel, and Swift 3, 4, 5.
Hold on. Wait, you just changed it. Say 1 through 5 again. What did you just do? Hold on. Do it one more time.
Gurley is 1.
Yeah.
Chubb is 2.
Uh-huh.
No Sean Marino is 3.
Okay.
Sony Michel 4. DeAndre Swift 5.
I mean, it's clear Gurley 1. No Musa Smith love, as we talked about 2 weeks ago. I knew you weren't going to do it.
Love.
I knew you weren't going to do it. I don't know. You know what's interesting too? That's going to be hard for those guys is that like they obviously Chubb and Gurley had the connection, then Michelle and Swift have the connection that you don't really know what it would have been like if they were just the guy by themselves, but they were just these two-headed monsters at Georgia that you just got to enjoy both. I think Gurley got a little bit more individual plub, and so did Chubb than Michelle and why am I blanking? Michelle and
Michelle and Chubb.
Wait, no, Michelle and
Chubb and Michelle were the ones that were together, and then
Right.
Swift was like with Holyfield. And,
Swift, yes.
Or Swift was like the third with Chubb and Michelle in 2017.
And I don't know, Swift was solid, but it never felt like he was an all-time Georgia running back. I think Kendall Milton's the biggest what if. I also think you know what? I would take Swift out and put Zamir White.
Oh, no chance.
I think I would put Zamir White there.
I'll get to my 6 through 10, but DeAndre Swift had like superstar ability. And it's like he was always maybe he's dinged up, like shared carries. Like it was always something kind of missing with his career at Georgia. But I feel like when you saw he was the only one that like was an elite talent like some of these other ones. But then 6 through 10, I go Kenny McIntosh 6, James Cook 7, Musa Smith 8, Thomas Brown 9, and Zamir White 10.
Zamir's too low. I think Zamir is being undervalued by you.
He just wasn't special like he was supposed to be. And after 2 ACL surgeries, was it 3? Was it at least 2 ACL injuries? Was it 3? I think he had 2 at Georgia. And like 1 was a senior in high school. I'm not sure, but I doubt he was as good as the prospect he was supposed to be before the injuries. He was still a good player, but I mean, you look at the 2 years where he was getting number 1 carries, he's averaging like 5 yards a carry, like 700-800 yards. Like he was fine. James Cook was dynamic, like did everything. Like Kenny McIntosh in 2023, like his first few games, like all of his production was like receiving instead of rushing. So he got off to kind of a slow start, but Kenny McIntosh, I think, might be the most underrated running back Georgia's had in recent history. Cause he was just dynamic catching the ball and running it. And then Thomas Brown, just a solid guy for 4 years.
I always remember Thomas Brown and Noshawn doing the crank that Soldier Boy in the black uniforms against Auburn. Two of them.
That's an all-time moment right there for Georgia fans. But yeah, and where is Thomas Brown now? I know he
was the OC for Panthers this past year. I think he might still be on staff. He's somewhere in the NFL now.
He's moving up in the NFL.
He's in the McVay game. He is now at the Bears as their run and their pass game coordinator for the Bears.
Okay, so he's going to be the one to blame for Justin Fields next year.
He went to Tucker. Didn't realize that.
Oh, yeah.
37. I also think, this is going to be funny. How many yards do you think Musa Smith ran for his junior year at Georgia?
I would say like 1,250 or something like that.
1,324.
Oh, yeah. It was a big year.
260 carries, man. That junior year for Musa.
Rounder to
third round of the Ravens.
Third round. Okay. Yeah. Big time year. 2002 SEC champs. Big time year.
That man gobbled up the carries. Man, I saw Musa Smith live. My parents took me to Ole Miss, Georgia, in 2002. Eli Manning year.
Okay. Oh yeah, the Moose chants back in the day. That was good stuff. He was a fan favorite for sure.
There you go, Matt Green. I like these every week. Stock watch. Something else we're doing during this off season, sir. Buying or selling Wazzu stock in the post Pac-12 era, sir.
I mean, you have to sell it, right? I mean, it's without being in the Pac-12, like without playing USC and playing Oregon and playing Washington, like why are we going to care about Washington State?
Nicely
Honestly,
done, nephew.
Like it's
the Chase Thomas podcast. Hell yeah.